Okay, we are now set to begin, and it really is terrific to have so many of you joining us for this session, which I know will be informative, titled Finding a Job in COVID Times. These are challenging times, and I'm confident that our speakers today will give you lots of practical, user-friendly employment advice. I can say that because I've had a sneak preview of the slide deck that's going to be presented today. I'm Ryerson. I'm the director of the Ryerson Faculty of Arts Young Workers' Rights Hub. The Hub's mission is to promote student and young workers' well-being at work. Specifically, we aim to advance understanding of your rights on the job, how to exercise and advance those rights. You'll hear more later about upcoming Hub events. But now I'd like to make an acknowledgement of land and of responsibility. Toronto is in the Dish with One Spoon territory. The Dish with One Spoon is a treaty between the Anishinaabe, Mississauga, and Haudenosaunee that bound them to share the territory and protect the land. Subsequent Indigenous nations and peoples, Europeans, and all newcomers have been invited into this treaty in the spirit of peace, friendship, and respect. As non-Indigenous peoples, we have held on to the one spoon for too long. We recognize our responsibility to advance justice for Indigenous nations and peoples. Before we get going, let me quickly review some Zoom logistics. This workshop is being recorded. All participants should be muted. And you can turn on closed captioning through the bottom Zoom menu bar by going to closed caption, show subtitle. And now I would like to invite Ryerson's Dean of Arts, Pam Sugiman, to extend her personal welcome to everyone with us now. Without Dean Sugiman's encouragement and support, there would be no Young Workers' Rights Hub at Ryerson. Pam, thank you for your support and encouragement. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Meyer. And before the real discussion begins, I would like to take a minute to in turn officially welcome Meyer Simiatiki to the new role, his new role with the Young Workers' Rights Hub. Meyer's role is so new that I didn't even know what his official title was. I know what his role is. I didn't know what his official title was. I think we're still finalizing the details. For now, I'll just say he's in charge of everything with regard to the Young Workers. And he's guiding it. He's offering wonderful visionary ideas, and he's coordinating a number of exciting events that hopefully at the end of this event, you'll hear more about what is forthcoming. So thank you, Meyer, for advancing our mission, our mandate. And this is especially meaningful given that Meyer has now retired from Ryerson University. So he has been spending his valuable retirement time working for the Young Workers' Rights Hub. And as many of you know, Meyer has been a professor in the Department of Politics and Public Administration for many, many decades, and has also played a leading role in Ryerson's Immigration and Settlement Studies program. And throughout his life, he's been an advocate for workers' rights, and other issues of social justice. And one of the reasons we launched the Young Workers' Rights Hub in the Faculty of Arts is to more fully support students, and art students, but also students beyond the Faculty of Arts. We know that the majority of Ryerson students must combine their studies with various types of paid work. And after they graduate from university, of course, like most Canadians, they will continue to participate in the ever-changing world of work. So as educators, I really feel that we have a responsibility to foster more conversations about work, about workers' rights, your experiences, at work and your thoughts about work, both as students and later as alumni. Today's event is one of a series of conversations that the Hub will be hosting, and I very much look forward to the discussion. Back to you, Meyer.
Pam, thank you very much. And yes, the Hub is all about supporting and assisting Ryerson students and youth more broadly as they engage in work, employment, and the labor market. And we are so fortunate today to have two superb presenters to shed light on a pretty challenging topic of finding work in these COVID times. This event is co-sponsored by Ryerson's Career and Co-op Center. And from the Career and Co-op Center, we have two career education specialists who will hopefully be guiding us through your search for fair and good work. Laura McKinnon and Ketan Marbali are career education specialists with the Ryerson Career and Co-op Center. And I'm very, very grateful to them for co-leading this session. Laura and Ketan will speak for about 30 to 40 minutes, and then we will go into a question and answer session. If you have any questions that might arise at any point in their presentation, please do enter those questions into the chat function. We have some flexibility for the overall timing of this session, and we may extend a bit beyond 5 o'clock. So all that said, a huge thank you to Laura and Ketan for being with us and for leading this conversation. Laura, over to you.
Thank you so much, Meyer, and thank you so much for that introduction. I'm just going to start my slide deck, so do bear with me for one moment while we do the technology dance. So I know that Meyer offered a brief introduction to myself and my colleague Ketan, but I wanted to share a little bit more about who we are and the Career and Co-op Center if you haven't engaged with us before. So I'm Laura McKinnon, my pronouns are she and her, and I'm the career education specialist supporting Faculty of Arts undergraduate students and alumni. You might have met me in a one-to-one appointment or see me in one of your classrooms, or maybe you've attended an event, or if we've never met, maybe this is the first time that we're interacting, in which case, so glad that you're here. You can contact me by email on the screen or by LinkedIn. Either is fine. And I'll turn it over to Ketan to introduce himself as well.
Thanks, Laura. Hi, everyone. My name is Ketan Marbali. I work as a career education specialist with the Faculty of Science supporting graduate students. We have another colleague named Maurice Fernandez who works with the undergraduate Faculty of Science. So if you're an undergraduate in the Faculty of Science, you're more likely to see him at some of your events. And like Laura said, we're here to help you with any of your career needs, networking, resumes, cover letters, whatever it is. So please feel free to contact us via LinkedIn or email. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much. And if nothing else, this workshop is not that long, so do consider this a start to the conversation. And whatever questions you're left with at the end of today, do feel free to get in touch and reach out. We do offer one-to-one support now and then up to 5 years after graduation. So if you're here as a graduating student and you have a lot of career questions, don't hesitate to reach out for support. So today we are going to be, speaking rather briefly about the job search and application techniques. This is a challenging time to be looking for work, but we are also in a different labor market than 1 year ago. And so although it is competitive and finding work we know is not easy, we really hope to offer you today some actionable tips and resources that you can take away to support your job search. So here's a little bit of what we'll be going through today. So we're going to share a few pandemic specific job search tips. Then we're going to look into the sort of where and how to look for work question with a focus on short-term employment goals. Who is hiring right now and what kind of tools or resources can you access, especially if you're looking for summer or immediate work. We will briefly touch on a resource that supports long-term career action planning, but that's not really our focus for today. Then after that, I will be turning it over to Ketan to speak to how to build a strong online job application with particular reference to the resume and a very short introduction to online networking. And then of course, we'll have time for questions at the end. After questions, we will be sharing some resources. Another reminder that this session is being recorded today. And we have also, there's also a link that you will be emailed after, and we can share it in the chat, that has all of the resources found on the slides today, plus more. So rest assured that you will have access to everything after today's workshop. So I'm going to start off with some very general tips that apply to any job search. So the first thing we would recommend is to research how COVID-19 has affected your industry. For example, in terms of the available positions, maybe the current working conditions, if it's virtual or in person or temporarily virtual. And if you're not sure where to look, we have linked to some labor market research tools in the resource document, but also Google can be a great place to start. So, when you're looking through job postings or, just looking for information about your industry, do try to get a sense of how has my industry been affected by COVID-19. The next thing I'm going to suggest is to think about your transferable skills and be flexible in terms of your short-term employment goals. So transferable skills include the interpersonal, communication, organizational skills that you obtain while working previous jobs, undertaking volunteer work, participating in extracurricular activities, and simply completing a university degree. And these transferable skills are not industry specific. And they can include things like customer service and communication skills, time management, problem solving and initiative, and responsibility. And so building your awareness of your transferable skills is important so that when you're reading job postings, you count yourself in to opportunities, where those skills could make you a good fit. If you're looking for work for the summer to pay the bills and make some money, that's great. If you're looking for opportunities that align with longer term career goals, that's also great. The important thing is that you remain open and flexible to a wide variety of opportunities, remembering that you will learn something from every experience. And sometimes it's just important to find a job, and we totally understand that. The next point to consider is that you want to present yourself in a competitive manner, meaning that you're going to consider your online presence and present a strong job application, meaning your resume and cover letter. So something to consider is that employers will likely Google you. They might search your name and see what comes up. So try to think about, which of your social media platforms are public versus private. What is easily accessible to someone who is Googling you. And then if you do have a LinkedIn, take a look at it and make sure that it's up to date and contains, the most current information. And of course, if you want support on LinkedIn, we can also help you with that if that's a new tool to you. So that's one aspect of presenting a competitive application. The other part is thinking about your resume and cover letter. And so Ketan will be speaking more about that, but a few basic things. You want to make sure that there's no typos. You want to make sure that you followed the application instructions. Very simple, but many people don't do that. And then recognizing when you might need more support. So accessing the resources of the Career and Co-op Center, to have someone look at your resume or help you strategize to make an effective cover letter. The next thing to consider is that you want to stay organized and track your applications. If you are applying for quite a number of jobs, it can be easy to lose track of where you'd applied. We've linked to essentially like a Google sheet that you can fill in to keep track of your job applications. And then the last thing I will add that's not here is that it's really important to reflect on your job search experiences as you move through them. So you're learning from your experiences. It's something I'm sure you've had to do in class. If there's any sociologists in the room, maybe the Deal method of reflection is something you've learned. So you want to think about, okay, if I've applied for 25 jobs and I haven't heard back, what could I be doing differently? Who can I reach out to for support? Maybe I need to get my application looked at. Or if you're not finding opportunities, maybe you need to get some help to learn new job search strategies and find new tools. So do spend time reflecting as well on what's working and what might not be. And then just a note about, mental health and well-being within the job search. We totally understand that it can be very, very stressful. And so with that, I really encourage you to practice self-compassion and exercise patience. Making your next career move is really a series of small steps rather than one big eureka moment where suddenly you know exactly what job to apply for. The research does take time and effort, and so you're going to need to make space for this exploration. And so when it comes to, a self-care plan or whatever you want to talk, whatever you want to call it, you might think about, how are you going to take care of yourself in this job search? How will you use your time? What will be the balance you pursue between applying for jobs, doing research, following up on opportunities, and taking breaks, right? Which is also necessary. Who is your support network? If you need help, where can you get it? So identifying some of that stuff is just as important as knowing where to look for work. And we've listed a bunch of mental health support resources, but I wanted to point out just a couple. So we've listed some resources that are for and by the Black community, as well as mental health resources for and by the Asian community. And lastly, of course, versus and strategy. The next one I want to highlight is Magnet. Magnet is Ryerson's job board, which means that employers who post there are looking to hire Ryerson students. So if you don't have a profile on Magnet, I would highly suggest that you create one. It's a great way to find jobs where the employers are looking for students, right? They know that you're there to learn, and they're looking for the skill and talent of Ryerson students. Another job board that is sort of also for Ryerson student, it's called Talent Exchange, and it's a job board that does mostly have technical roles, particularly under the umbrella of engineering and computer science and sales roles. And it's similar to Magnet in that you provide some information on your education, work experiences, job preferences, and then based on that, your preferences and experiences, it can create a filtered list of jobs to match that. So it's not Ryerson specific like Magnet, and jobs are posted from all over the world, but it's another great AI enabled tool to help you find work that matches your skills and experience. And the last thing that I wanted to highlight was the Breaking into Research cheat sheet that we created at the Career and Co-op Center. And it's basically a big roundup of research opportunities as an undergrad. So within the nonprofit, academic, and public sector space, they're not always as easy to find. And we know that there's tons of undergrads who are interested in breaking into research in some capacity. So we pulled together a ton of resources into a single spreadsheet. And just to reiterate that you will be getting access to this slide presentation, so with all the links live, so you will be able to look up these resources after this workshop. So the previous slide was about some general job boards where you can look for work. But here's another list of tips that have to do with who's hiring now. So if you're looking for work right now for the summer or to meet immediate needs, there's a few different sort of tools and tips that we can share in terms of finding organizations and companies hiring right now. So one of the best hashtags to follow on LinkedIn is the Now Hiring. LinkedIn also maintains an article called Who's Hiring in Canada? And there's like 100 companies on that list who are hiring for thousands of jobs, and it's constantly updated to reflect the labor market. So that's a great article to look for companies that are currently hiring. In addition, if you are ever having trouble using keywords on a job board, such as Indeed, you can put in immediate hire as a keyword, and then you'll find places that are looking to fill a role right now. Something new that has obviously exploded during COVID is the rise of remote work. And there's a whole bunch of different job boards that are now tailored to fully remote jobs, meaning you would never have to go to a physical space. And a few of those include Mondo Jobs, Work from Home Pad, and Virtual Assistant Canada. And then as well, there are also ways to do English language tutoring through various online platforms like QKids, Cambly, VIPKid, and Tutor.xyz. So if you are interested or maybe have some prior experience with peer mentoring or peer tutoring and would like to teach English, there are ways to do so online. The next program is called Youth Job Connection, and this is currently offered fully remote, and it's for alumni. So if you're an alumni or about to graduate and currently not studying and not working, you can apply for the Youth Job Connection. It is for folks under 30, just to be aware, but they essentially offer training and then paid work placements as part of their programming. And one thing that has happened in COVID is that we have seen the rise of certain industries, right? There are industries throughout this pandemic that have thrived throughout, and some of those include entertainment and technology. We've all been streaming nonstop throughout the pandemic as entertainment. E-commerce is a really growing industry, online education companies, productivity software, cybersecurity, contact tracing, and more. And so an awareness of the industries that are doing well right now is a way to better direct your job search. The other thing to consider too is that tech as a sector has generally done fairly well in the pandemic and sort of maintained their levels of hiring. And if you're here on the call from a non-technical educational background, never fear, 40% of tech jobs are for non-technical roles. And especially if, maybe you have some part-time work experience in a restaurant or a grocery store, they're hiring for tons of customer support roles, which, the skills that you have from your part-time work are very transferable. So don't count out the tech sector, even if you're not in a technical role right now. There are also quite a number of government programs that do support new professionals or current students with different employment programs. And there are several that are still open and hiring right now that I wanted to point out to you. So the Ontario Public Service does hire for its summer employment opportunities, and that program is still open to current students. And it's also worth noting for future that they do also have programs for new professionals if you have recently graduated. The Job Bank is the Government of Canada's online job board. So you'll find a mix of jobs from sort of random companies who choose to post there, but then also you'll be able to find government work on that site as well. Young Canada Works is a program, again, for people under 30, and they typically hire for roles under the umbrella of culture, history, and sport. And then, Youth Job Connection is posted twice a year. My apologies, that was from the previous slide. But then I also wanted to point out that this is the time of year that municipalities, including the City of Toronto, hire for their recreation jobs for the summer. And there are quite a number of roles being hired for right now. I also know that City of Vaughan has an internship program. They're hiring for some interns right now. So wherever you're located right now, definitely look up the jobs that your local municipality is hiring for the summer. And then lastly, at the bottom of the slide, this is the Federal Student Work Experience Program. It's run by the Government of Canada. And it's basically, you apply to be entered into a pool, and then employers who want to hire students can look at your application. And so because of the sort of hiring pool nature of that program, it's open all the time. So they hire on a rotating basis. So you can still apply to FSWEP, as it's called. And then if there is a role that suits your application, then you might get a call for a job interview. So on the note of industries that are hiring right now, we couldn't do this workshop without mentioning that healthcare has definitely seen, a big rise in hiring in certain areas. And so if there are any, in particular, Faculty of Community Services students, in the webinar today, I know there were a few. This might be particularly pertinent to you, although there are, some personal support worker training programs that have become available. So there are lots of different kinds of jobs within hospitals, whether you are a registered nurse or a personal support worker. And we've linked a whole bunch of different places you can look for those postings. And then, of course, the other big sector that is hiring a lot right now is health and safety. And so if you're either from the Occupational Health and Safety Program or you have prior relevant experience, there are lots of different organizations, such as the ones that are listed there, like Canada Post, Adecco Canada, et cetera, that are hiring for health and safety officers. And so that's, just something to be aware of in terms of a sector of the industry that is currently hiring and has continued to do so throughout the pandemic. And this is something new that I am very excited to share with you, is that there is an organization called Ryerson, and the program is called Level Up, sponsored by the Government of Canada, that's actually hiring students to complete projects for money. So it's this very interesting program where mostly startup companies can basically say, we have a project that we need support on, and students can apply to work on that project. And it's basically a flexible way of getting paid to do interesting project work. Each project takes about 80 hours to complete, and you have a timeline flexible of 2 to 8 weeks to do so, and you get paid $1,400 per project. And there's no limit to the number of projects that you can complete or apply to. So this program is open till March 2022, so it's going to be ongoing for quite a while. So if you're curious to maybe either work with a startup or you'd love to, to work on a project and get paid, if you are a current domestic student, that's the qualification there. I would really encourage you to visit the Ryerson website to take a look at the available projects to see if anything sparks your interest. It's a great way to maybe take something you've been thinking about a little bit further and certainly work on your skills and gain very valuable real work experience. And then the last thing that I will say, I know this is going by very quickly, but I think we're fitting into the time. The last thing that I will say in terms of sort of the idea of employment goals is that although we don't have time, of course, to talk through longer term career planning today, that would be an entirely separate workshop. We do have a great resource that you can consult to support you in creating a career action plan that will help you answer the question, who am I? What's out there, and how do I get there? So if you're at the stage of, say, you're looking for, to address your shorter term employment goals, maybe find work for the summer, but you're still thinking about your longer term career planning, this is a great tool to help you kind of work on both at the same time. For example, your short-term goal might be, okay, I need to work on how to create a more effective cover letter, but your longer-term goal might be, how do I use LinkedIn to find someone in an industry of interest to ask them for a virtual coffee chat? So if you wanted to create those kinds of longer-term actions, this tool will definitely help with that. And just a couple very general notes on considering longer-term career planning. We'd encourage you to build professional relationships, i.e. network, and attend, different industry-related events to get a sense of what's out there and what kind of skills your industry of interest is looking for. And then again, you can be working on your short-term and long-term employment goals at the same time. And every job or opportunity that you have, you will learn something from, and you'll be building skills. Your career is essentially a path that emerges in very small steps. So really just focus on what's the one next thing I can do to move my career forward. And so I know that was a lot of information. Again, you will have access to this, but we are at this point going to move from talking about job search resources to how to work on your job applications to make sure that you present yourself as a competitive candidate. So at this point, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Ketan, to take us through.
Great, thank you, Laura. Okay, so now we're going to talk about your job application, and probably the most important part of your job application is your resume, which contains a summary of your skills and your experience. So the resume is basically, like the figure says here, a marketing document to get you to the interview. So the short-term goal is to get the interview. And for the employer, it's a way of really evaluating how good the candidate is, whether their skill set matches what the job posting is asking for. And so for both the applicant and employer, the resume is a very critical tool. The next slide, please. Yes, so the best case scenario is if these circles would, align 100%, but in the realistic world, what both the employer and the employee is looking for is the best fit. So the employer wants to know if these are the job requirements that are there, who's the best candidate I can get for those? And your goal as an employee is to be able to sell your skills, really be able to tell a story and be able to describe your qualifications, your relevant qualifications for a specific job posting. Next, please. So the most important tool you can use in your resume is keywords. And what do I mean by keywords? So keywords could mean skills, abilities, credentials, or qualities that the hiring manager who is going to be looking at your resumes is going to be looking for. And there are a couple of different ways you can gather these keywords. One is obviously by just visually looking at the job description, and you'll see particular skills or keywords being repeated several times. And so you know that that's something that the company or that particular job really values. And you would then go back and check whether you have those qualifications or skills. Next slide, please. Yes, so let's take an example of a job description here. So here's a customer service job application or job description, and you can see that we've underlined some of the key skills. So you can see there's developing relationships, setting and achieving goals, strong communication, interpersonal skills, conflict management, strong time management, being able to work individually as well as collaboratively. So you have to have examples that illustrate all of these, or the most, number of these skills that you can demonstrate on your resume. What I would also suggest is using the same keywords that are in the job application, because for those of you who are not familiar with it, a lot of big companies have tracking systems that basically will screen all your resumes before a pair of human eyes sees them. And so it's important that your resume has a certain amount of overlap with the keywords in a job description. The sweet spot is somewhere between 70 to 80%. So your goal should be to get it, as close to 100% as you can. Next slide, please. So how can you really customize your resume for the job listing? And this is something very important. A lot of times we make the mistake of sending the same resume without really changing anything to multiple different jobs. And so it's really important to understand that you have to tailor, you have to customize your resume to fit a particular job description. Even if it's the same role in different companies, there will be minute differences in what each company expects. And so you have to go that extra mile and really, really customize your resume for each role. So ideally, what I would recommend is having a Excel sheet or folder where you keep track of all the jobs you're applying for, and then having different versions of your resume stored for each of the jobs you're applying for so that you can customize them. Let's say there's 2 or 3 different kinds of roles you're applying for. You can have a sort of a template, a parent resume, and then you modify that for each of the job postings you're applying for. So it's important to obviously mention keywords in the professional summary, which is at the very top of your resume, which is kind of like the essence of your qualifications and skills and what you're looking for in a job posting. And then we go to your education and other sections of your resume. It's important for you to add relevant experience. So relevancy, recency, and readability. Those are the 3 key things for a resume. So it's important to be relevant in terms of the job skills that you need for the job posting. It's important that these experiences are as recent as possible. And then it's also important that it's readable. You're formatting the resume in a way that is pleasing to the eye. So you don't use too many graphics or too many distracting fonts. You try to keep the formatting as uniform as possible. And then you can obviously reorder sections based on relevancy to the job posting. So if there's certain skills or projects that are more important for a particular job posting, you can always move things around. You can change up the style. So some places will ask for a 2-page resume. Some may say only 1 page, in which case you pare down the content and only focus on the most relevant things. If you don't have a lot of work experience, always remember that you can also include relevant courses that you've taken. If you're someone that is applying for lab positions, for example, and you don't necessarily have research experience, remember you can use the labs that you have as part of your coursework in your resume. There's also some very useful tools that you can use to make sure that your resume overlaps with the job posting as much as possible. And we've listed links to those at the bottom of the slide here. So basically what you can do is put the job posting in the job posting column and then the resume on the other column. And what these programs or these websites do is they match them up to tell you what the overlap is. And your goal should be to try to get them to overlap as much as possible. Next slide, please. Oh, Laura, did you want to add something?
Yeah, I want to add one thing. So when you were talking about bringing forward your academic experience on your resume, I just wanted to remind everyone that a lot more experience counts than you might consider. So employers don't exclusively value paid work experience. That's a fear that I hear a lot. Volunteer experience counts, and extracurricular experience counts. If you worked in a family business, if you have a side hustle, if you have a Shopify store, all of that counts. Academic, relevant academic projects count. So don't worry if you feel like you haven't had enough paid work. All your experience does count. It's all about, is it relevant? And it's up to you to describe why it's relevant to the employer. They won't automatically know that XYZ volunteer experience, matters to the job, but don't count those experience out, in terms of considering to apply for a job.
That's a great point, Laura. And in that same line, I would say don't count transferable skills you've used maybe in extracurricular activities. If you've been the head of your student union or if you've been head of a club, remember that's still a leadership quality that a lot of employers will value. So it's not necessary that your transferable skills solely have to come from your academic or work experience. They could also come from your extracurricular activities. So I mentioned to you about basically a computer or machine analyzing your resumes, and that's what an ATS or an applicant tracking system is. So before a pair of human eyes see your resume, whether it's a hiring manager or a human resource a person, there will sometimes be an ATS that tracks your resume. And what it basically does is it essentially does the same thing that the websites I told you about before do. It basically matches the job description to your resume and looks for certain keywords. And not only does it look for those keywords, it also looks for the frequency of those keywords, meaning how many times are they repeated. So if you see a keyword being repeated a number of times in the resume, I would try to have that keyword as many times as possible on your resume. Of course, in relevant positions in sentences that fully explain your skill sets. And like it's mentioned here, beware of anything that can add on too many graphics or things like that on your resume. So use those keywords throughout the resume. Have a skills section that really just in the skills section, you don't necessarily have to have full sentences. You can just list the key skills that the job listing is asking for, things like MS Office or particular maybe software for data analysis are kinds of examples of things you can put there. Check for typos. You'd be surprised how many people submit their resumes without doing a quick spell check on Word. If you're really critical, you can also use things like Grammarly or software that also looks for more advanced grammar mistakes, for example. So invest the time in really proofreading your resume. Maybe even have a colleague or a friend look at it. Sometimes a different pair of eyes really helps because you can also get their perspective on it. I know I've sent my resume to a friend or a colleague before I've applied for jobs, and it's been helpful most of the time. So it's a really good resource. We do have a tip sheet link at the bottom of the slide that'll be included in the resources that are sent to you at the end of the talk. Okay, next slide, please. So now we come to online networking, or what you'd often hear this term called the hidden job market. So what the hidden job market really is saying that the jobs you see on Indeed or a lot of websites, sometimes there's already a person that the company's chosen internally or maybe through referral. So for you to really have that advantage of being able to be in the people that are considered for the job and make that next step, it's really important that you network. And online networking is not spamming people, it's not pestering them. Very importantly, it's not being pushy or aggressive or asking or demanding for a job. What online networking is an exchange of ideas, it's an exchange of information. The most common term you'll hear is informational interview. And what that means is you reach out to a professional on LinkedIn, asking them about their job position, what their typical day is like, basically getting to know their professional role, their path to their professional role, so that you can emulate that maybe or get some ideas from their journey, but with the goal of really establishing a professional relationship, and never ever ask for a job. That I think is probably the most unprofessional thing you can do when you're trying to establish this relationship. Be your unique self, be your authentic self. Realize that Zoom burnout is real. A lot of us are attending Zoom meetings all throughout the day. So if sometimes a professional takes a week or 2 weeks to get back to you, understand that they have other priorities. And so give them the benefit of doubt. But a good professional relationship can definitely evolve into what is called as a referral, which is when the person would recommend you, let's say, for a job at their company. But it's your job to really build that connection and build that network. A lot of the online networking, like I said, nowadays is taking place via Zoom. Because of COVID, we can't really meet in person. And so informational interviews are key. And we have some great resources on how to do informational interviews. You can find them on our D2L Hub or in one of the Career Compass publications that we have. We also have a prep guide, and we have probably have a presentation also on informational interviews. You can also look for alumni on the Ryerson University LinkedIn page. So you can filter alumni by, let's say, your field of interest or your major. And that's a really good way of connecting with people. So utilize your alumni network, utilize your social network. So for example, if you're involved in extracurricular activities, you'd be surprised. I've gotten leads from my tennis friends. I play a lot of tennis. And so I've asked them sometimes for, hey, do you know someone that works in this field? And they've made introductions. So you'd be surprised that through your family, friends, and alumni, just with those three things, you could build, a great professional network. At the same time, don't be intimidated to reach out to a professional on LinkedIn. But the key thing is, before you do that, make sure you have a really polished LinkedIn. It's all about branding. So the person that sees your LinkedIn, that's your first impression for them. So you have to make sure you represent your best professional self on LinkedIn. Other things you can do to kind of spruce up your LinkedIn are posting relevant articles on fields that you're interested in transitioning in, even writing articles, blogging about them. All those things are really, really useful. One way you can find information about companies is to go through their websites and go through their different social media channels. You can find out about any initiatives they're supporting other than just what is involved in the company and the roles. So it's a good way of also getting information that you can potentially use when you are talking to someone during an informational interview.
If I can actually add one thing in terms of maybe the feelings involved in reaching out to someone you've never met, maybe the idea of trying to speak to someone with whom you've never spoken, it feels a bit intimidating, which is completely normal and natural. But something that I'd like you to think about is you have some kind of relationships in your life, right? Whether you have friends or family, and there's habits and behaviors and things that you do to maintain those relationships. Maybe it's consistent communication. Maybe it's being curious about the other person. Maybe it's about simply moving forward with kindness. Like a lot of those skills you would use to maintain your personal relationships transfer to professional, but the content is different. So, reaching out consistently to someone maybe every couple of months, or, creating questions when you're talking to someone that invites stories and open answers, right? Bringing that spirit of curiosity. Those are things I'm sure you've done, talking to your friends, talking to your professors, talking with your family. So don't necessarily think that it's this entirely brand new skill. You can work off of a lot of your relationship building skills that you currently possess, but just as I said, the content is different. You're having professionally related conversations. You're not talking about personal hobbies or your family status or, very personal topics, but trust that you have the skills to build those new relationships. And remember that for the most part, people love to talk about themselves, right? If you ask questions that strategically invite open answers and stories, you will mostly be listening, I promise you. So, if you're feeling a little bit intimidated, do as much prep as you can. Think of the questions you'd like to ask ahead of time. Think about the learning goal for the conversation, but know that really the professional will be doing most of the talking. So that's the only thing I wanted to add. We have like 1 minute before we're going to start our Q&A, and I have just 2 slides of tips. I don't know if Ketan, there was anything you wanted to add to close out your section.
Just like Laura said, make it about the person you're doing the informational interview with. That's the most important thing. And as you build that relationship, you'll find that person will ask about you too. So it does happen, but you have to be patient and really make it about them. That's the key thing.
Yeah, thank you so much. I just wanted to close out before questions with a few tips, 2 slides of tips that kind of, circle back and kind of capture the essence of some of what we told you. So the first thing we recommend is to check job boards often and use diverse strategies. Doing online networking is another strategy in addition to looking for work on online job boards. On this spectrum of passive strategies to active strategies, Passive would be, looking at online job boards. Active is reaching out to folks to build those professional connections. It's not about better or worse. It's that you want to be using diverse strategies in order to, create the most opportunities for yourself. Many positions have become available recently or pivoted to remote. As I said, the labor market is in a different place than it was last year. So do check fairly regularly. Like, I know I can't speak for Ketan, but I look up job postings 5 days a week, and I see tons and tons of postings. Know also when you're thinking about what works for your own life that many roles right now may start remote and either will stay remote or have the expectation of moving in person at some point. So do think, does that work for my life? When you're considering opportunities. And then we linked to a couple of workshops that will support you in the other aspects of looking for work, which is virtual interviewing, and then again, further information on virtual networking. The last thing I always like to say is don't let fear stop you. When you're job searching, you will probably not have 100% of the skills that are required. So just like Ketan said, when you're looking at the list of qualifications, like, don't wait to be an expert in something to apply for it. If you meet about 60% of the qualifications, we would really, encourage you to apply. Employers are willing to train you. There's an expectation you will learn on the job, and they're looking for that aptitude and attitude, right? Of being willing to learn and being someone who's adaptable and interested in problem solving and all that kind of stuff. So, don't let what you don't know yet stop you from applying for a job. And then, one last thing that is specifically important for uncertain times is focus on creating short-term flexible goals. You can't really control or predict the future. Think about what's within your control right now. What's the one next action you can take that that you can do, to move your career development that much farther forward? Is it looking at 3 new job boards? Is it opening up the email from us after this? Is it getting someone to look at your resume? Is it trying out a new keyword in your online job search? So focus on what you can control, because every time you take an action, you will learn something new to move your career development forward. So with that, we're going to move into questions, and I am going to stop sharing for the moment so that we can just sort of be faces. And Giselle already mentioned in the chat that we're moving into the Q&A portion. So I think that she is going to ask the questions to us, and then we will do our best to answer them. And if we don't, we will hopefully direct you to a resource, or we'll say we don't know and we'll help you find the answer.
I'm just going to jump in for a moment. Giselle Gerardo, who is a 4th-year politics student at Ryerson. And Giselle has been hosting this event, and leading up to it has done so much to make it happen. Giselle, thank you. And are there any questions, Giselle?
Yes, we do have a couple of questions here. I would say several, actually. So the first one we have is, where is a good place for finding startup job postings?
Oh, I have one for that. BetaKit. BetaKit is a great job board for looking for startup work. I think it's betakit.ca. So that's one. Also check out the DMZ at Ryerson. Like, all of the zones are places to find startups. Some of them are hiring summer students, but it's also a great way to learn about up and coming companies. The other place you could look is workintech.ca. That is a roundup of jobs from the tech sector specifically. And then the last one I would suggest is Mars, the Mars Discovery District, which is, I don't know how I would describe it. Like, it's a big organization that has a lot of different companies, many of which are startup. They tend to be working on interesting sustainability projects and, and other things like that. They host a job board, and they also themselves hire. So those would be my suggestions. Oh, also networking groups on LinkedIn. There are a lot of different networking groups for a lot of different interests. So that's another space. I don't know if Ketan, you had some other suggestions.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you, Laura. The next one we have here, is it possible to also discuss and maybe give a guide on how LinkedIn works? Maybe something short, a few starting guidelines for LinkedIn.
Yeah, so we have a whole webinar and resource sheet on how to use LinkedIn effectively, because it's certainly it has its own thing, right? Its own sort of like mini culture and ways to use it effectively. So what we can do is, I'll make sure that Giselle has a link to our how to create a powerful LinkedIn profile webinar, and then you can it can be included in the resource email, and then you can start from there.
That's good. Thank you. Next question is how to reach out to firms that haven't posted a job. So how how would I word a cover letter to ask if I can help with anything or asking for an informational interview?
I think those are, they sound like three different questions actually. So I will say, so I'll give my example. I was a neuroscientist before coming into the career education space. So the way I made that transition is I reached out to people in the career education space to learn about the kinds of skills that I would have to pick up to be able to transition. So I think my advice to people is always, if you're pivoting or if you're considering, going into a specific career path, you can definitely reach out to people via LinkedIn. Like I said, make sure it's a link, your profile is polished first. Or you can just reach out to them, say, I'm reaching out for a short coffee chat and I would love to learn about how you transitioned into this space. And most people will share, what their journey was like. And so if it's a firm you've never worked with, for example, one thing is to look at your existing LinkedIn contacts and check if they know someone in there. So the way LinkedIn works is your contacts are your first degree contacts. Their first degree contacts are your second degree contacts. So there may be someone in there in your second degree contacts that maybe is at that company. And so that's one way you could do it. And like we mentioned, utilize the alumni from your university, look them up from the groups, chat with them. First, there might be someone at that company. And I'm not sure if LinkedIn has that feature, if it's the pro, but there's a way you can, if you click the company name or the company page on LinkedIn, it'll tell you who the employees are. It might even tell you if there's a second degree contact working there. Laura can add on or correct me if I've missed something.
No, I mean, it all sounds correct. I was just going to add on about the cold emailing thing a little bit. So if you, for example, you see an organization and you don't see an internship and you really would like to work there, if you're going to email them, you have to be strategic. So learn as much as you possibly can about the organization, including identifying how you could help them. How could you help them move their vision or mission forward? I often speak from like a nonprofit perspective, which is the language they use, but how could you help them move their work forward? And, it is implied that you would learn while you were there. They know that, but they don't want to just hear, I would like to come here and learn. What they want to hear is, I'm super interested in your organization. I think I can contribute in these ways. I'd love to talk to you about maybe an internship for the summer. And really, nothing ventured, nothing gained. All you can do is try, but in order to have the best chance of that email being seen by someone, you want to be really strategic in demonstrating you did really good research on the company, their current challenges, the problems they're trying to solve, et cetera. And you have told them why you would be someone who could help them contribute to that. We do have a cold emailing guide as well. It's very similar to informational interviews. It's really all about demonstrating you've done research and demonstrating how you can sort of support them in their work.
Thank you for that. Just a friendly reminder, we'll ensure to send you all of these resources. The Ryerson Career and Co-op Center has a lot of resources for you. The next question that we have here, I would like to know more about the requirements for the Ripen projects and if they're accepting applicants ongoing.
They are. It's ongoing. So the best way to find out more about the requirements is to just look on the website. At the basic level, you have to be a current domestic student. And beyond that, the program is active, like the funding for the projects is active until March 2022. So the best thing is just to look up, the next steps on the website in terms of registering and then applying to work on projects.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you. The next one, this one may have been partially answered during the presentation, but how could someone actually get 100% match to a job posting? Is that possible, or would that mean that all words would be the same as the posting?
I don't think 100% match is possible unless you just use the keywords and had nothing else on the resume and you repeated them the exact number of times that the job posting had. So no, that's why I said 60, I'd say 60 to 80% is what the usual range is. That's at least from my experience from applying for jobs. You can use the tool mentioned in in our presentation. So no, 100% is, I don't think it's possible. And I apologize if I misspoke and said 100% during the presentation.
I think the other thing to keep in mind too is that it also still has to read like a person wrote it, right? You're not trying to like beat a robot. You're just basically trying to make sure that you have highlighted the skills they're looking for, right? That's what's at the essence of this strategy. But if you use 100% keywords, like Keaton said, you won't have sensical sentences anymore, right? So it still has to read like, you know, when a person eventually does see it, they're going to want to get a good sense of who you are. So it is part of the strategy when you're applying through an applicant tracking system. But it's just as important to be truthful about your experience and that you're describing it in enough words that people understand what you're saying and you're not just like communication and 100 times. That's all I'll say about that.
Thank you. The next one is kind of like a quick question. I've also always thought about this. Is it important to keep resumes to only one page?
I can start if that's okay. And then, so people have a lot of different thoughts on this. What I don't like about that is that I don't really believe in hard and fast rules when it comes to strategies for applying for work, because if you're sticking to the rule of one page, you've abandoned strategy. Like, what is the value of one page? So if they have asked for one page, follow the instructions. That is a rule. If though you have 2 pages worth of relevant experience, it's probably in your favor to share that. We always say at the Career Center 1 or 2 full pages, but I think that to me, and that 1 page only always seems arbitrary. There are, however, different standards across different industries. So if you are looking to work in a specific industry and you have a coffee chat with someone who says, hey, my company expects 1-page resumes, that's insider information that you would want to take into account. But I think that as a rule, I don't really believe in rules. It's not strategic, right? Just like people who say, oh, your education should be at the bottom. Well, what if your education is extremely relevant to the job? It should be at the top. You know, I have a dance degree. I don't put my dance degree at the top of my resume anymore because now I'm in career education, but I used to if I was applying for arts education work. So I would really think strategically and worry less about rules.
That is very good to know. Something to keep in mind for myself as well. The next one is, can we ask a professional for resources to volunteer?
I would say first start with, there's an organization I think called Volunteer Toronto where you can look for volunteer opportunities. So try to see if there's already existing volunteer opportunities out there for that company. If there isn't, I would be tempted to say you can ask for it only after you build a professional relationship. So you've networked with them, maybe talked to them 1 or 2 times. And then, you know, when you feel like they're open enough to, you know, discussing your professional aspirations, you can maybe bring the volunteering aspect on there. You have to be careful with volunteering because sometimes, you know, it may take up a lot of your time and you may not be able to focus as much on job hunting. So you have to decide where that balance is. And yeah, I'll let Laura add anything I missed.
I think starting with an existing resource like Volunteer Toronto is great. Of course, if there is an organization within your community, within your personal geography that you maybe are involved with and would love to maybe extend that into volunteering, that's a different thing, right? But that speaks to what Ketan said, where you might already have a connection. But don't, you know, if you can manage, say, even a couple hours a week, don't discount the professional value of volunteering as what we call like a dip your toe in experience, especially if you're like, do I like this? Like, do I want to pursue this more? A little bit of volunteering is a great way to gain information and then also, you know, give back to the community.
I'm going to jump in to say we are now in overtime and that we will go till about 5:15 for those who are able to stay, just because many people probably have other obligations and commitments to get to. So we're definitely in the home stretch of the session. But Giselle, continue with questions as they've come in.
Sounds good. We do have a lot of questions. So we'll try to pump out as many as we can in the next 10 minutes. So the next one we have is, this is also a really good question. How many people should a person have in their professional network?
I don't know if there's a fixed number. I will say the more people you have, the more advantages it is, but be strategic about you know, building connections. Sometimes you're on a roll and you feel like, oh, I made 10 connections this week. Maybe I should shoot for 20 next week. it's not a numbers game. It's more of how can you establish quality professional connections that will help, that you can mutually, help with careers and things like that. So the other thing about professional connections is once you become a professional connection with someone, a lot of people nowadays will post roles at their companies, or maybe cross-post roles that their connections have posted. So it's really about quality over quantity. It's really about establishing good professional relationships that you can continue building even for life, So I would say quality over quantity.
I also want to add, I just want to say that your fellow students, your fellow peers are also part of your professional network. So when you're on LinkedIn, please don't hesitate to connect with someone who is at the same program as you or someone in the same university. The next question is, this is also very important. As students, we're quite busy on school commitments. So does it look bad on a resume if you haven't had a job for a while because of school commitments?
I can start this one off. I mean, your reality is your reality, right? And we understand, school takes up a lot of time, but I would suggest then that you might have to lean a little bit more maybe on your academic, or if you have co-curricular experiences on your resume, which is fine. There is a certain amount of understanding in terms of the pandemic, right? A lot of people ended up, they lost their summer jobs last year or whatever. So there is understanding around that, but also that a lot of people maybe don't give, say, co-curricular experiences or academic projects the space that they could take on their resume. Like they might put one line saying, VP of events for my course union, but they don't take the time to write those accomplishment statements, which accidentally devalues that experience on your resume. So I would encourage you to, to think about the experiences you have that transfer to the jobs you're applying for and write about them, especially those co-curricular experiences, as though they were jobs, right? Where you had responsibilities, you have accomplishments, and you gained skills. The other thing that you can think about doing is that there are lots of free and affordable ways to keep learning online and upgrading your skills. And your LinkedIn especially is a great way to showcase that. So even if you haven't worked, you've learned a bunch of stuff at school. And then maybe if you're transitioning into, if you don't have a summer semester, maybe you're taking an Excel course through LinkedIn Learning, which is free for Ryerson students. Or maybe you are taking a program through edX. Or maybe you are spending some time, learning about Photoshop, whatever it is. People like to see continuous learning. So that really matters as well if you don't necessarily have paid work that sort of fills that space.
Sounds good. Thank you, Laura. I must say, I also treat my co-curricular experiences as a real job. So I don't like to devalue them. And that's where I got most of my jobs nowadays. The next one is, a lot of job postings ask for a minimum amount of related experiences. Do I still go on and apply? Or if an employer is asking for experiences, does this mean that they're not willing to train you?
So that's slightly tricky to answer. I think Laura can correct me, but I think it comes down to the final pool of applicants. So if it's a job where there's 100 applicants and the majority of them have, 2+ years of experience, it does minimize your odds. But I would say if it's a role that you're really keen on, just like we both mentioned that the job posting is a wish list. It's not what will eventually, you won't find someone that has everything on that wish list. So if the 1 to 2 year experience is one of those things on that wish list, and you have other skills that can maybe propel you further than other applicants, then I would say by all means, go and apply. Unless they really, really put it in the job posting that, applicants that don't have this much experience will not be considered. Yeah, that's kind of my take.
I'll just add one detail when it comes to years of experience. So they're not necessarily expecting that you had 2 years in the same job. Like that doesn't really exist, right? Because otherwise you would just have that job. You can consider that you can pull together all of your different experiences that are transferable, maybe to make up 2 years. Maybe you have 6 months in a student leadership job and you have 5 months in a customer service role, or you have X number of projects. If you sort of looked at that together, is it sort of 2 years? Like sometimes those estimates are kind of arbitrary unless you're applying for a job in a very regimented field where the employer would know exactly what you were doing 2 years prior. They likely have just chosen an estimate. So if you have some experience, that maybe if you pulled it all together would be 0 to 2 years, then I'd encourage you to apply. But as Ketan said, sometimes it just depends on the pool of applicants and not so much on yourself or the job posting in terms of if your application is moved forward to the interview stage.
Sounds great. The next one is, so this one's a little local. If you want to work for Ryerson after graduation, where would you find job postings?
So Ryerson University has its own job board. If you just search Ryerson careers, you'll find a page that says I'm an external candidate, and then you can look for available postings. But of course, I would further suggest, from the perspective of your professional network, that you speak to your Ryerson contacts, your professors, maybe administrative staff, student affairs folks like myself and Ketan, to make sure that you are, again, taking advantage of your professional connections, as well as looking at the available postings. And actually, just a note about working in universities and colleges in general, maybe at a new professional level in terms of finding opportunities, you often have to go directly to the university or college's website. I don't necessarily always see those jobs posted on Indeed. So for example, if you're like, oh, I'd like to work at George Brown, it's near my house, you might have to go to the George Brown website as an example. But do take advantage of the fact that you're already a student and chat to people about different opportunities.
Thank you for that, Laura. I also want to add that if you're a student staff, a career boost student, a research assistant, you do have access through your EHR portal to look in the current job posting. So while you still have your contract, look into that one. The next question that we have is, what is the most important thing to communicate in cover letters?
So I'll give my take and then Laura can give hers. So the way I see it is, the first paragraph is usually kind of you expressing your interest and very, very concisely saying how you're a good fit for this role. The second paragraph usually builds on that and gives specific examples of skills that they're asking for. You can also add things you may have left out on your resume that are still relevant for the job posting. And the last paragraph, I usually try to ask, or I usually try to talk a little bit about the employer and how my values correlate with their values or how they overlap. So it's kind of talking about yourself, talking about what you can offer, and then talking about how you're a good fit for the job in terms of what the employer is asking for. Those are the kinds of things that I would focus on in a cover letter. For Canada jobs, typically, I would say keep it short, 1 page, 3 paragraphs, and yeah.
I'll just add one thing to help maybe folks understand the difference or purpose between cover letter and resume. So a resume is really about you and your past experience that is relevant to the job. And then the cover letter is about you in the future with the employer. How will you help them achieve what needs to be achieved in this job? So a common mistake that I see is people in cover letters saying, I want this job because I want to learn how to do this. And that's great. You will learn. It is implied. But the employer is more interested in how will your past experiences, skills, and strengths contribute to accomplishing the goals of that job. So obviously expressing enthusiasm for the job, that you're so excited about it, is really important, and it's part of the cover letter, but just focus on how you will, as Ketan said, contribute to what that employer needs out of that role.
Thank you both for that one. So I just want to say that most of our questions are about new graduates and mature students. So I would like to flag that to both of you. So maybe in your resource sheet that you're going to be providing afterwards, you can include specific resources for new graduates and mature students. So the next question that we have here, are there any general tips for reducing the scope of jobs available on job searching platforms to faculty-specific careers?
So do you mean trying to actually have less results come out when you're searching, or is it about keywords? Can you just repeat the question one more time?
Yeah, so are there any general tips for reducing the scope of jobs available on job searching platforms to faculty-specific careers?
I think what they're asking is, how do you make your job search more focused? That would be my interpretation, from a more general to a more focused job search. I think it's about using the keywords. So how certain positions have certain keywords listed or certain job titles. So for example, our job title here is career education specialist, but in another university, it could be career advisor. In another university, it could be career coordinator. So it just depends. So it's about if you can gather the keywords that you know are in that job position or job title, and then use different combinations of those to do searches, I think you'll be able to really refine and eliminate non-specific results.
The other thing I want to add, and I realize now we're 1 minute over, Meyer, I'll just finish this last little one. So the other thing I do want to caution against is only using the name of your major as a search term. And I don't know if this is what the question was getting to, but I do see it sometimes where students might come in and they say, I put the name of my major into a search engine and nothing really came up. And that's not because your degree is not valuable. It definitely is. It's just that the name of your major is an academic term understood by universities and folks in the academic realm, and not always, depending on the industry, understood by industry employers. And this is particularly relevant to art students. And also an employer doesn't know what's Ryerson sociology versus York sociology versus U of T sociology. So what you want to identify for yourself is what are the skills, experience, interests, and knowledge from your degree, and use those as search terms instead. So as an example, if you're an English student and you really liked the course you took on archival research, using the terms archive or archival research might get you more specific results, like Ketan was saying, than typing in English. Because oftentimes employers, they will describe, depending on the industry experience and the qualities and the knowledge someone has to have without using the name of your degree. So, you know, you can definitely look and see, and maybe it's different when it comes to science or other programs that are more registered professions. But that's another way to sort of narrow down the results, is honing in very specifically on your own interests, knowledge, and experience.
So as Laura has said, we are now in overtime on the overtime, and I really don't want to overtax Laura and Ketan, because I don't want to give them any possible excuse for saying no the next time I'm sure I will be reaching out to them to connect again and support the work of the Young Workers' Rights Hub. This has been fantastic. You have given us such a rich, informative, and hands-on practical presentation. I can only imagine that everyone has come away with a better sense of pathways to identify prospects for employment and how to go about positioning yourself for applying for work opportunities. So Laura and Ketan, bravo to you, and thank you so much. I also want to,
thanks for the great questions, everyone. We appreciate it.
Amazing, wonderful.
Thank you so much.
Really interesting, insightful questions. And I'll say that I believe that Laura and Ketan are open. They've put out their email addresses at the university. They're welcome to receiving follow-up questions if you want to put follow-up. The other thing is they have on several occasions mentioned the really rich collection of material that is available on the website of the Ryerson Career Center. And so I would really encourage everyone to check out that. And I want to close on two fronts. One is a bunch of thank yous. It takes a surprising number of people to have an event like this happen. I've mentioned Giselle Gerardo already, Taylor Deasley, Hala Bakhtari as students. And in the Faculty of Arts, Melissa Wong and Derek Reynolds, remarkable work in producing our promotional material. And again, thank you to our inspiring Dean, Pam Sugiman. A last thing, we have at the Workers' Rights Hub other events planned that I think you will find interesting, informative, and in some ways our next event that you can see on screen now is, I think, a very natural follow-up. It will be presented by one of Canada's foremost economists and experts on the changing nature of work in this country. He's an economist who speaks language that we can all understand, incredibly accessible, Jim Stanford. And the point of his presentation a week today at 3 o'clock is, what does every student need to know about how the world of work is changing in order to best position yourself for employment? So if you've heard a lot about gig economies, changing nature of work, automation, new automation that's coming, new work restructuring. Jim Stanford next week will put that all together for us in a really informative and accessible way. I thank each and every one of you for being with us. I hope you have found it informative. And to all the students, best wishes in this last week of classes, and even better wishes and success in your upcoming exam period. And thank you for taking the time to be with us today. Thanks to all.